Josie, 44. The narration at the start is annoying. It's just recap, and we already know that Alexandra having a magic cat looks like a bad thing without this rubbing it in. Josie and her friends are on the way to Alexandra's house because Alex wants to show them the old family book. Probably in a bit of anger at Sebastian when he wasn't thinking ahead. Because it'd clearly be stupid to do anything to make this magic thing temporary. I wonder why Alex invited Sheldon too, if he's supposed to be unimportant. He has some forced dialogue where he hopes the book is a cookbook when he was just told it was a family history book. Alan sure is polite to go here despite thinking that old family history sounds dull. He must really want to hang out with his friends. Alan tells Alexandra to stop flirting with him, being like Fleetway Sonic with Amy at first, which surprised me because I thought he was just being portrayed as a nice guy. Josie and her friends walk away bored of their family history. Alexandra says they can't force them to be fans of her family, and justifies why she said that when she says she's still new at casting spells and isn't sure of herself. I wish she reminded them that it's weakened 400-year-old magic instead, because that's a more believable explanation when even a novice would have no excuse for screwing up the spells she has. It's not so in character of her to blame herself insecurely instead of blame her cat or the magic itself. Alex wants Alexandra to cast a spell to make them appreciate them, not realizing that it'd be meaningless then, and too desperate for magic to work out to not bother because her spells usually mess up. He tells her to make Sheldon give up a pie for practice. Wouldn't he hear them? They should have been drawn whispering. And in universe, that must be what happens in these situations. Sheldon has unrealistic dialogue like a parody, and Alexandra says a spell out loud in front of him, telling him to toss away the pie. He throws the pie at Alex, and Alexandra says she must have said the spell wrong, but it only makes sense if she did it on purpose. Or Sebastian did. Because she would have had to imagine this for it to happen. How else would magic work? I don't see how she would have said the spell wrong. She said it fine. And again, why doesn't Sheldon question the fact that she said a spell and then he did what she said and then they said this? She can cast spells just by thinking, so she has no excuse for saying them out loud if she wants to hide her magic. It could make sense if part of Sebastian witchcraft is making people unable to question this and believe it's from them. I would have said Sheldon didn't question this because Alexandra wasn't thinking about him doing so and made that a part of the spell by mistake, but she isn't that competent yet. Alexandra looks at the book to see what she did wrong and says a spell to open a secret passage in the house. This gets Josie and her friends' attention, and Alex assumes it was always there instead of thinking that she created it. Alexandra's attempt at flirting with Alan backfires and makes him think about Josie instead, and I think I'm done mentioning moments like this if they aren't relevant to the plot. They see a message about lifting a weight beside the gate, and Alex tells Alexandra, in a whisper I guess, to put a spell on the weight so that he could lift it and show up Alan. She agrees if it'll turn Josie against him, but she should know it wouldn't. So really she has to be lying because she just wants to help her brother. Because if turning Josie against Alan was really what she thought would happen, it would have happened. But after the spell works out, Josie's just surprised that Alex was that strong. Hey, why doesn't she just cast a spell to turn Josie against Alan? Either because she's an idiot, or she knows it would be broken by Melody eventually anyways, so she'd have to recast it over and over, and she thinks that's too much work. Melody just commented on his strength, so she could have easily not complimented it again and snapped her fingers. The weight weighs down Alex's hand and falls on his foot. Either Alexandra just whispered about magic here, or Josie and her friends are too polite to make fun of her. And surprisingly, we don't see Alexandra use the spell to heal his foot. So I have to assume it happened off screen. After they see an old bedroom, and Alexandra's attempt at flirting with Alan gets him to make a joke at her expense, Alex runs no problem, telling her to stop trying to hit him with her cat. She was really overwhelmed by anger, because that was a stupid idea. Good thing for her the cat's loyal to her, right? Or this would really backfire. For these stories to make sense, I'm gonna have to just assume that every time they talk about magic, they're whispering. And I hate that I have to just assume that, because it's sloppy. Alex tells his sister to cool it, and she casts a spell to make whoever the beam hits love her, not thinking enough to realize that fake love is meaningless. But Ellen bends down to pick something up, and the beam reflects off a mirror back at her, which caused her to humiliate herself, bragging about her beauty. At least it became entertaining enough to make up for it when she looked in the mirror. But still, you'd think the beam wouldn't do anything to her because it knows she's not Alan. Because she was thinking about him when she cast the spell, so it shouldn't matter that she didn't specify Alan's name if she can cast spells just by thinking. Alex hypocritically says that vanity isn't something his family would approve of because their superiority is so obvious that there's been no reason to brag about it. Then why brag about it? Lucky for them, Melody is the type to have the habit of snapping her fingers when it makes sense, so she breaks the spell on her when saying that they came this way because she conveniently dropped her lipstick there. How did she drop it by accident and not pick it up right away? And how does Josie not realize that she's being uncharacteristically condescending by saying good girl, as if she's a dog, or little girl? Surprisingly, when Alex says it's a good thing Melody broke the spell, Alexandra doesn't know who put a spell on her. Why does she not remember that? It's pretty convenient that all brainwashing spells make people not remember what they did during them, despite that making them even more abusable. Alex tells her to recite the incantation that opens the secret door. Another reason I had to review the previous issue to memorize Alexandra's name is that Alex can be a girl's name too. I watched a lot of Wizards of Waverly Place when I was younger, so I'd know. Alexandra casts a spell to open the secret passage, and for no reason Sebastian ends up free from her grip and follows Josie and her friends out of there. And when Alexandra stands there asking what happens to her and is too proud to believe him, the secret door closes automatically. They could have so easily not been trapped in there. It's nice of Melody to feel sorry for Alexandra and say that Alex shouldn't be calling her a witch. And it's nice of Alan to have a plan to get them out with a hammer. That was conveniently there for some reason. Alexandra could always fix the damage with magic, so it doesn't matter. It's too bad the story ended before it would explain why on Earth there was a secret passage when there wasn't anything that needed to be hidden. I thought there'd be witchcraft stuff there. This story by Frank Doyle was a pretty interesting plot where Alexandra invites Josie and her friends to her house to learn about her family history. But they must have only gone there to try to eat their snacks because they walk away from them right away. Only for a secret passage through the house to get opened that looks straight out of a castle dungeon. I always thought this would lead to them finding witchcraft related things because that would actually justify why there's a secret passage. Instead, the closest we get to an explanation is that Alan's joke about how he'd seal up the bedroom if he married Alexandra might actually be why this place got sealed up. I don't see how Josie finds it romantic, when Alan's explanation makes it clear how it could be disrespectful. The only thing the story's really about is Alexandra using magic, and the twist is that for the most part she's good at it, using it to get them through the place. While it was confusing that she could accidentally cast a spell on herself, it was charming enough to be worth seeing. Next up is the 1969 Josie and the Pussycats comic. According to comics.org, thanks to the change in writers, the rules around Alexandra's witchcraft changed after this issue, and they seem to make more sense. Josie and the Pussycats 45. In the first story ever where Josie had a band of her own, Alexandra insists on it having a stupid name that she should know is too long to be good. And at first it matters that she won't play in the group if they don't humor her, until Alex tells Josie that the new girl in school would make the perfect replacement for her, because he heard her singing in the school auditorium, and of course he only did it to get in good with Josie. So for one, it surprises me that it took this long for the concept of Josie having a band to be introduced. And I never thought I'd read the story it happened in. And two, I'm surprised that it took so long for Valerie to be introduced. And they owed all to Alex bringing her to them. It's surprisingly nice of Josie to admit that he deserves a kiss for this. Of course, I wouldn't have talked about the story if Alexandra didn't use magic. She cast a spell to make a branch fall on Alex before he could get that kiss. What's interesting is that this is the first time she's cast a spell without holding her cat. And most shockingly of all, the writer was too lazy to have it be explained why she can do this now. Why would he think the audience would question it? I thought we'd see the first time she discovered she could do this. So I have to just assume something to make sense out of her being a witch and not the rest of her family. I have to assume that holding Sebastian and casting spells with him caused his power to seep into her after a while, and that was always the intention of her ancestor. And that she has access to his magic battery without one of her own. So that's why there probably won't be a reference to her needing to get it recharged thanks to Della. That's why she won't have to worry about permanently running out of magic because she could never know Della exists. I just wish I could have seen the moment where she was ecstatic at learning that she can cast spells on her own now. Josie says strange things always happen when she's around, even though this magic thing is very recent for her. In the next story, I can't blame Alexandra for thinking that the Pussycats' band outfit looks stupid, but it was a waste of time for her to look rude pointing it out. Alexandra and the group waste time bickering, and she says that they couldn't get bookings without her connections. And Alex calls himself Alexander, further explaining why his name's too similar to his sister, and says he got them their first booking. Wow, he's better than Reggie because they owe a lot to him. Melody and Josie hug him. It's so nice of them to do that for him. Alexandra lampshades that her brother's a traitor to her, though she shouldn't have gotten her way. But he should have known better than to tempt fate by saying that she can't always get her way, when she's an honorary witch now. Lucky for her, Dell doesn't care enough to greet her because she was born mortal, I assume. She casts a spell he somehow doesn't hear, making the broom sweep him out of the room. He's lucky she did that instead of casting a spell to make things always her way. When it gave her the idea, and that's what you'd expect her to do immediately. Maybe even she knows life would be boring and unsatisfying with that spell. I just wish that was explained. After Josie witnesses Alex get swept out of the house, we have to just assume their memory of this was erased afterwards, because the next panel has them at the school dance. Because even if part of her witchcraft meant they were always oblivious to it being from her, they'd just assume her house is haunted from this and never want to go there again. Or they'd realize Alex wasn't lying when he outright told them the truth about her earlier, because he did that. It's shockingly nice of Josie to ask Alexandra if she's sure she won't join their group. I'd think she wouldn't want her to be in it at all. She says she'll never join until she's the star, explaining why she'll be so spiteful later. The girls prepare for their first song at the school dance, and Alexandra casts a spell to make them meow. Somehow Alex thinks this is a clever opening rather than humiliating for them, so he snaps his fingers, which miraculously breaks the spell. And speaking of miracles, everyone in the audience seems impressed and wants them to play for all of their school dances, instead of just finding their meowing annoying. I can't really credit Alexandra for this because they would have gotten this result without her. I'm glad it's not just Melody who can break the spell anymore, because that makes a lot more sense. But it should have been explained that that change happened and why. Because we clearly saw him snapping his fingers when there wasn't a spell on to break, and the cat only hated it when Melody did it. But at least here, the cat's not here to give a new reaction to him doing this, so it's not a contradiction yet. In the next story, Alexandra sees Josie say she's glad she's going to be in the same class as Alan this term, and that gets her mad enough to cast a love spell on Alan, which works. Why didn't she instantly cast a love spell on Alan, when that's the other thing you'd expect her to do with magic? Well, it has to be that most of the time she knows it'd be unsatisfying to have him only love her thanks to his spell. Most of the time she's level-headed enough to know that, and want him to actually love her on his own. So she only tries this from an impulse when she's overwhelmed with emotion. She takes advantage of him by getting him to carry her books, which is smart. Josie finds it confusing and gets told that Alan belongs to her now, and somehow Alan says he really doesn't know. She tells him to give her a kiss, which he didn't do right away, and Melody snaps her fingers because she sees Josie and that makes him drop her. He says that whenever Alexandra's around, he finds himself doing things he can't explain, even though it's not whenever. And she has the common sense to give him a scientific explanation that's because of how pretty she is. Melody makes a rude remark about not understanding why she's considered pretty, so Alexandra loses her temper and closes the door on her. Thankfully, Alan helps her up and shows her compassion, so she wouldn't have gotten that without her. Alan sits next to Josie in class, so Alexandra casts a spell wanting the teacher to tell Alan to sit next to Alexandra. Well, she is an annoying character, so it's a bit annoying to have magic go her way. At least it works for escapist fantasy that it does go her way like you'd expect of witchcraft. A welcome change of pace from later Sabrina. Well, I'd be far more annoyed from confusion if it messed up. Because Alex does some annoying flirtatious boasting, the teacher decides to make Josie change seats with someone with a crush on Alex, which annoys him as karma. This means that Josie ends up sitting next to Alan after all, when the teacher could have easily had Josie switch seats with someone not next to Alan. I can explain this though, the teacher just wanted to spite Alex by making him have to sit next to someone he'd hate the most. The teacher decides to have the students pass around an ant colony. Will this really happen on the first day of class? The teacher asks Josie to pass it around when could have asked someone else easily. Josie tries to butter up Alan by offering to get him a look at it first. So Alexandra casts a spell to make Josie drop the ants in Alan's lap. I can understand why the rules changed to let her cast spells without her cat, because her needing the cat is way too limiting of the story potential. Well, this way she can do this anywhere. Josie says the case is slipping, and Alan reacts fast enough to push it away because he's an athlete, and knocks the case on Alexandra, getting her covered in ants. And she's humiliated as she runs out of class. With how annoying she's been, it's hard to be that opposed to this because it's direct karma. She jumps into the pool, says what happened, and the girls freak out about the pool being full of drowning ants. And the story ends with a girl named Gwendolyn somehow thinking she has a chance with Alex. This is issued by Dick Malmgren. In the first story, Josie forms her band for the first time, and Alexandra wants it to have a name she should realize is stupid. And when Alex gets a replacement for her in the band to foil that plan, she hexes them to get back at him. There's not much to say about the story because it's as short as it needs to be. I'm just surprised it took this long to see them form the band they're so famous for, as well as meet one of the most iconic members. And it's good that Alex was responsible for a great thing by introducing them to Valerie. In the second story, Alexandra tries to ruin their first performance for not going with the name for their band she wanted. But the spell gets undone before their meowing could go on too long. And somehow the meowing they did impressed the audience instead of annoying them. That's a relief because that would have been sad, but it doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is anyone being able to break the spells, which can be explained as her ancestor wanting to put a limit on the trouble she could cause. But I hate that it doesn't explain that, because it's not like that for the real witches. These rules shouldn't exist for no reason. And in the third story, it's Alexandra get mad because Alan and Josie get to sit together in class, and her spells to try to get her own way don't work out. The love spell gets broken too fast, explaining why she didn't have him as a permanent boyfriend earlier. And then when she tries to get ants to cover Alan, his quick reaction caused it to happen to her instead. The story makes sense because it's not like she messes up her spells, but it's still not about her getting away with everything. It makes up for her having these powers she doesn't deserve because she spends the whole story not getting what she wants, and it's not too irritating because it's for believable reasons. So this is the second best kind of story for her. The first best would be a good thing happening because she used magic.